if I'm 6 years old and I have lost my shoes in the school playground, and I've lost my shoes, and I'm really, really upset that I've lost my shoes, right? And I'm so upset, I'm throwing a big tantrum, I've got all these emotions going on, right? That can actually leave a mark on my nervous system as a 6-year-old. Right. In just the same way as a 6-year-old that has been through some kind of neglect or abuse. Okay. That can leave the same mark on our system, right? So it all depends on the perception, how those emotions, how those situations are dealt with. So I really don't think it's as clean cut as little T's, big T's. I think people know if they've experienced some heavy stuff, the big T's, right, traditionally speaking.
Charlotte, welcome to your Body's Way podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you. And I am very, very happy to be here. I'm super excited about this whole podcast and everything you're creating. So it's a pleasure.
Oh, good. Well, everyone needs to know, first of all, that we're really good friends. We've been friends for years, but you're also a mentor of mine, I would say. So, I watch a lot of the things that you do online, and I take notes, and I like to, kind of follow in your footsteps sometimes, which, you're my coach, and you're one half of the wellness theory. So tell me a little bit about the wellness theory and, let everyone know what it's all about.
Yeah, so first of all, you're a soul sister 100%, and I love you so much. And it's everything is mutual, 100% of what you just shared there. But wellness theory, so wellness theory is the name of my company, which is with my partner in business and life, my husband Jonathan. And basically, we're stress relief specialists who coach high performers to eliminate unhealthy stress, be well, and essentially live authentic, meaningful lives so they can be healthy and well, and then translate that to be a force for good for other people in the world.
And that's why I'm so happy that you're on this podcast, because how many people need to have help in kind of like sorting out, working through their stress, working through any of the things that hold them back in order to be their best selves. Like, I think most people need to have help in that department. And that's why it's so important that you're on this podcast, because this podcast is all about being your best self, like how to maximize who you are. And I love what you guys stand for, because you're all about maximizing who you are and expressing yourself in the best way possible. But I love the way that you guys are all about getting to the root of what might be holding you back from that. So you guys focus on stress, which is basically what most people deal with. So I can't wait to dive into that and to get into what the wellness theory does and how it applies to your life, because if there's one thing about you, you walk your talk. You walk your talk. Like, whatever you preach, whatever you put out there, whatever you teach, you do it too, and you do it to the max. And basically on this episode, I want to go into all of the things that have stood out to me that you have done to kind of set an example for your clients, and then also how the listeners can then take it into their life, and how they can, like, any tips that they can take. But before we go into it, we've just come out of the new year. So it's 2023. Have you set any goals, any New Year's resolutions? Are you New Year's resolutions people, or are you kind of like the type who's like, nah, I don't believe in that stuff?
I'm not a big New Year's resolution fan, only because of the connotations that are attached to them, right? Most of the time, it's very easy to associate New Year's resolutions and failure, people starting and giving up. So I think subconsciously there's already a connotation that's going to not necessarily set people up for success. So I believe in them if the person that's setting them is actually committing to what they're doing, rather than just saying it because it's the new year, right? But for me, have I set any goals? So I've just literally come off the back of last year's stretch goal, which I know you said you want to chat to me about. But the thought of a new one, not just yet, let's say, but every single year I do something, and I pick what we call an anchor word every year. So instead of setting a specific goal, I pick one word that I can come back to throughout the whole year that will keep me grounded, keep me centered. And essentially, if I make sure I stay anchored and grounded in that one word, then it's going to keep me on track with whatever goals I set throughout the whole year.
That's
so last year, the goal, the word was optimization.
Right.
So it was all about optimizing everything.
And I remember
business.
that.
Yeah,
exactly. I remember when you said, because I remember you came to me straight away and you said, how do I test how many minerals I need, vitamins I need, like how do I test my health? I'm just like, okay, this is what you do. And I got that, your word for the year was optimize. So what is it? Yeah. Carry on.
So that's what it was for last year. And so this year, to answer your question, is my word is depth. Just to go even deeper in thinking, deeper in purpose, deeper in health, deeper in connection. So depth, basically. As long as I keep going deep in everything, then I know, like, wholeheartedly that I'll then achieve whatever it is I set out to achieve throughout the year.
And I kind of resonate with that, because I think it's very common for people to kind of go through the routine of life. So, for example, my routine would be, wake up, take the kids to nursery, and then to come home, do my work, and then go get the kids from nursery, and then spend some time with the kids, and husband comes home, dinner, Netflix, and that's the kind of daily humdrum, that's the daily routine of life. And it's very difficult to actually find the depth in that. It's just what I do day to day. And so the fact that you are committing to going deeper into things, like, I can imagine that brings a kind of richness to life, and it makes your duties more rich and more deep, whereas sometimes it can feel really surface level.
100%. Like, I totally resonate with what you said there, is like going through that kind of routine, and I think it's very, very common, and I've definitely been in that space, and I can feel the difference when I'm going through my routine and I'm very present, and I know I'm doing it with solid intention because I've said it first. So I don't have kids, as you know, but I can imagine the fast pace of everything, the distractions, that having to be in 100 places at once and be aware of everything all at once. We obviously work with clients who have got kids and stuff as well. So but then obviously running a household and running your own podcast and business, all these different things, like, there's so many responsibilities. And I think
it's difficult sometimes to get deep, it's difficult to kind of really sit into what you're doing.
But that can also obviously be because we're going so fast, right? And we have to learn how to slow it down, even when things are moving fast. I am like I'm a classic overachiever. I'm somebody that will want to do everything, do it and have it done by yesterday to the highest standard. That's just me all over. And I've had the periods of my life where I'm working crazy hours in the morning, crazy hours at night, and on weekends, just because I'm in that space and everything's fast, I'm on the go, and all of those things. And I think I love the word you use there, is the richness, right? Is the ability to be able to find the richness in that momentum. And I think that's something really probably over the last year or two that I really feel like I've started to master, is being able to almost slow down time. Still everything's moving really fast, but I'm almost like being able to step back from it and be able to just see how things are playing out. And a lot of that has got to do with presence, practicing really being present. So when you're cooking your meal in the evening, it's like, okay, what am I actually doing? What can I feel under my hands? What can I taste when I'm eating it? Am I just having a conversation with my other half, or am I actually tasting the food that I'm eating, or am I watching something at the same time? Like, am I trying to do all these things at once? Because every time we try and do everything at once, that's when we get distracted and end up getting lost in it. So,
I mean, I'm not one for setting New Year's goals and New Year's resolutions. Like, it's not something that I usually do. But this year, all I have is a list of things that make me happy, because like I said, that the routine of life sometimes can get a bit like can get on top of you, and you can find that life kind of loses its excitement sometimes. And you know, I get into that rut sometimes, and I think a lot of people do. So just by writing a list of the things that make me happy, just nothing big, like nothing like, you know, this year, you know, things that make me happy, I'm going to jump out of an airplane and I'm going to do all these wild things. It's just a list of small things that I enjoy doing currently, just bringing it to my attention and then wanting to incorporate it into my life more often. So things like reading a novel. Like I only read a novel in the evening, but then like before I go to bed, but then maybe just by putting it into, you know, my daytime, just putting a bit more time into it, like having coffees and, you know, chatting with friends and just small things like that, just bringing it to my attention so that I can make sure I include it in my day so that I can kind of bring more enjoyment into my routine. But then one of them is to be more present. So what I've been doing every day in 2023, which is, by the way, is the 3rd of January. So
far, so good.
I've been keeping up for 3 solid days. Every morning I've been going outside and sitting down and kind of just thinking and kind of centering myself and thinking, okay, so Tam, how do I feel? And kind of being present with how I feel, how my fingertips feel and my body, and, you know, just kind of sitting into myself. And it literally takes about 5 minutes. And it's really amazing how that actually helps. Like, it actually helps kind of center myself before I get started in the day. And yeah, that's something that I'm trying to include a bit more day to day for myself. Yeah.
So I love that as a practice, but also like really want to highlight what you just said about making that list of things you really enjoy, the things you really want to do, because we're more present with the things that we love, the things that bring us joy. So just by doing that alone, even if you didn't do that 5-minute like immersive presence exercise, you would still be bringing more presence into your life just because you're trying to fill your days with more joyful activities. So the fact that you're combining the two, that's just going to amplify it even more, which is awesome. Going to accelerate it.
Well, that's good to know. But so we're talking about small goals here. We're talking about, you know, making lists and, you know, thinking of words for the year. But I know that you've just touched upon it, but you have literally just completed a huge goal at the end of 2022. That was your goal to kind of get it done by the end of the year. It was to kayak around 3 islands of Thailand, and it was a 37-hour excursion, like kind of broken up into pieces. But what I love about it and what people can take away from it is, like, you call it a stretch goal. So basically, first of all, what is a stretch goal? How is it different from a normal goal? And then go into what your stretch goal was and what it was all about and how did it go?
Okay, all right. So first of all, I didn't create stretch goals. This is something that I learned from one of my mentors, JP de Villiers. And basically, the premise of a stretch goal is that we set something that is going to push us beyond our comfort zone, right? Is what I'm sure you can imagine. But it's about being stretched so much to a point where you can't go back to it what you were before. Right. So this time last year, I couldn't sit here and have this conversation with you in this way because essentially I'm a different person based on how much I've stretched myself and what I've learned over this past year of training for that goal. So a stretch goal is anything that's going to push you beyond your limits, but that kind of scares you a little bit, something that you don't think is possible. So as you said, I chose to go around 3 islands in Thailand, and initially we just moved to Thailand, and me and my husband were staying in a house up in the mountains, and we had this beautiful view over the sea. You could just kind of see the surrounding islands and stuff. And I was sitting up there. This was at the end of 2021, and I was sitting up there. I said, "Wouldn't it be cool just to kayak around this island?" He just laughed at me, Jonathan. He just laughed at me and was just like, "Yeah, all right. Like, why would you do that?" I was like, "Wouldn't it be good?" And then I thought, okay, well, I know I could do one island. Right, so that wasn't a stretch goal because I knew I could do it. So I knew once I started, I wouldn't stop. So that's how it then extended to, okay, well, 3 islands it is then, because I don't know that I can do 3 islands. So that was kind of how it began, and how I ended up choosing that challenge for last year.
So a stretch goal is, if I could just summarize, it's something that once you've completed it, you're a different, like you're different, you've changed because you've done it. I love that. I freaking love that.
So it's not just about, so for me, I chose obviously a physical goal, right? The kayaking, but it wasn't about the physical feat. Now it was like, don't get me wrong, I've obviously got fitter in the process, and you know, I've evolved in different ways physically, and had to be more disciplined with nutrition and rest and sleep and honoring my body and all of those kinds of things. But it was way more about me moving past the things that I was scared of. Like the first time I went out in my kayak, I was like, I didn't want to go past the end of my little bay. I was like, oh no, it's like big rocks, massive waves. Crazy. And I'm like, no, turning around, coming back, you know. So mentally I had to move past a lot of potential blocks as well. And I've not been somebody that's ever had like a fear of the ocean or anything like that, but yeah, I was still coming up against those things. And every time I went a bit further and a bit further, it obviously built a different level of confidence in me as well. And having that amount of time for this goal in particular, and spending this amount of time in training and obviously in the event itself, was incredible, because it was time in isolation, it was time in solitude, it was time for me to just think and to be and to just listen to myself and what was going on in my own mind.
And just by watching you, like through your videos on Instagram that you posted, I feel like your most creative stuff, like your motivational kind of talks on Instagram, you used to do like 6-minute videos. I feel like your most creative times came during those kind of trainings, 100%. When you're out in the kayak on your own. Like I feel like that's when your creativity really flowed.
Yeah, 100%. It's my happy place. But also, when I think of something, if I you know me, I love to journal. Like I'm a massive journal person. But obviously out on the kayak, I don't have my journal. So it was almost like just a live journal thing, because as much as it was there to serve other people and share it and hopefully inspire 1 or 2 people, it was very much about documenting it and really like reaffirming the things that I'm thinking and articulating them in a concise way so that they sink in for me too. So yeah, absolutely, like being out in the ocean, like open space, obviously it was beautiful on the most part, except from training in the wet season. That was not very beautiful at all. But all of that, you know, it's definitely my happy place, and I think that definitely helps to get things flowing, because if you've ever, and I know you have, ever tried to sit down and meditate, usually, especially in the beginning, it can take a good 10, 15, maybe even longer minutes for your mind to switch off, or at least for the thoughts to calm down, and we stop thinking, did I leave the kettle on, did I lock the door, did I do this, like all of those things, they start to quiet down after a bit of time. So after about 15 minutes in the kayak, my mind would settle, and then I could, with all the kind of day-to-day stuff, and then I was like, okay, exhale, like this is beautiful, like be present with every paddle stroke, and all of those different things, you know, started to come out. And I think it's just giving myself the space and time to be able to do that was probably the most powerful thing.
I think it was Bear Grylls who said that when you're outside, you're doing something physical, it's one of the best states for you to be in, because you're forced into presence. And that's kind of what you just said, like, and it's funny how that matches. But I think there's something to be said for being outside and moving your body, because I remember when I was back in London with my husband, we used to take these huge walks. Like we used to walk for 2 to 3 hours, sometimes almost every day, at least 5 times a week. Like we went through this phase where we'd kind of go outside, rain or shine, like we'd be out walking. And, you know, after you've kind of warmed up, and after about half an hour of kind of like just, you know, silence, you then find that you have some of your best ideas, and we'd have some of our best conversations. And a lot of the things that we're doing today, like, you know, we're living in the Cayman Islands and we've had some lovely experiences in the meantime. A lot of those things were kind of manifested during those walks, which is crazy. Like, so I feel like there's something about being outside, moving your body, and connecting with someone. There's some sort of magic that happens when you're kind of combining those things.
100%. Like I think that it brings us back to our true nature, right? Because we always say like time in nature is amazing, as if we're not in nature already. We are nature, and I think we forget that sometimes. So when we go into nature and we go for the walk in the woods, or we go outside, or you dip your feet in the ocean, whatever, like actually all that it's doing is reminding us, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, but it's reminding our system, it's reminding us, our soul essentially, that we are part of all of this. So we actually connect, automatically we connect. And I think that then just has this beautiful cascade of effects with ideas that start to flow, and how peaceful we tend to feel, and all of those kinds of things.
There's a scientist called David Sinclair. Have you heard of him? He's he's basically studies longevity. So he's coming up with all of the best things about, how to make your cells young. And this brings me back to something that he said in one of his podcasts. He says, one of the best things you can do for longevity is to go outside, walk with a friend, and talk about your problems, which is interesting, like to kind of unload your stress, because you're all about stress and managing stress. So like, what a great way to unload your stress, just by connecting with someone, being outside, walking, and just unloading your problems, and like connecting and talking. And I think he said on a cellular level, that's a really great way to kind of stay young, which is really interesting. Like there's definitely something there. This makes me want to go outside. Like the sun is shining in my face. Like I can barely see, but after this I'm just like, I need to go outside and just kind of move my body, because we forget to go outside and do things and connect with nature and be with each other. It's just such a simple thing, but we forget to do it.
It is, and it's on the most part as well, like for sure everything you've just said there, it doesn't include any kind of technology.
Exactly.
Right? And when we're attached to any kind of device, our nervous system, or all of our cells essentially, are being stimulated, right? Whereas actually when we're outside in nature without any devices, our cells go into their natural mode as well. So there's almost like this certain stimulation that we get to substitute what we used to indoors on devices a lot, versus then outdoors, no devices. We're actually connecting with the true energy source of the earth, right? And other people, right? When we're bonding with other people, we're in rapport, right? We are literally start to mimic each other after a certain amount of time, and that's all happening because we're becoming in sync. Whereas if we're only ever in sync with a device that's full of all sorts of different things that are not so healthy for us, on the, if we overload our time using them, it just becomes a no-brainer that we need to remember that, especially now the way technology is going, with AI making things even more convenient, let's say. It's scary.
It's really
it's going to be an interesting road ahead.
It is, and it's a major source of stress for everyone. That the way the world is at the moment, particularly, it's crazy right now. There are so many things for people to be upset about, to be stressed about. There's so many divisions happening. So like people taking sides, people having different beliefs, and people getting angry for other people for having beliefs. And so the world is in a crazy place, like it's in disarray, it feels like. But then also, obviously, we all know the challenge of social media and being instantly available and being notified all the time of, things that are happening around you. And there's so many, it's fertile ground for stress. And so I imagine with what you do at Wellness Theory, you've got your hands full with lots of people who are stressed about things. But the way that you structure things is, okay, so to be your best self and to live your best life and to be as authentic as you can, let's clear up your stress first. Let's kind of sort those things out. So I guess my first question about that is, do we have to sort out our stress? Like, do we have to work through those things? Can we just be our best selves without dealing with all that stuff? Like, it's too hard. So, I mean, what can we?
I really wish I could say, do you know what? Just keep going and roll with it. And I'd be doing people a disservice, I think, if I said that. But with the caveat to that is everybody experiences stress in different ways, right? So some people have like minor stresses, as in their nervous system doesn't react in as extreme ways as other people.
Okay.
It's not right or wrong, it just is what it is. Some people have more tolerance for certain things, right?
So there are small stresses, like, so for example, this morning getting my daughter ready for nursery, the baby was crying, like kind of rush. That was a stress. And so you're saying, so you just have to be able to handle that stress better. That's one section of what you do, what you help people with.
So exactly. So for example, that's what we would say you're experiencing stress at what we call a life level, right? So we essentially teach that we have 3 levels of stress that we experience stress on. We have the life level, which is our everyday life stuff, right? It's parenting, it's finances, it's relationships, it's your job, all of those kinds of things, right? Then we have our health. We experience stress on a health level, which includes things like our ability to breathe efficiently, our ability to make sure we're emotionally regulated so that we don't fly off the handle when one kid's trying to get ready for school and the other one's screaming, right? It's like, do you go berserk, and like, does it really turn you into a bear with a sore head, or are you able to take that in your stride, right? So you'll notice the extreme difference will depend on where you're experiencing that stress. But the 3rd level of stress is what we call the root, and this is where there's stress that is been there for a long time, that has built up over time. So for example, let's use the example that you just did. If you've got one kid trying to get ready for school, the other one kind of just screaming, you can take a few deep breaths in that moment, regulate yourself, not let it ruin your entire day, and actually maybe have some kind of fun with it in the end, and teach the kids a little lesson about it's okay to cry to Bowie, for example, or it's okay for Bowie to be crying while you're getting ready for school, he just wants my attention. You can use it to your advantage, right? That would be a resourceful way of dealing with some kind of stress. There is like what you perceive it to be. If you was experiencing that on the health level, right, chances are we get extremely emotionally overwhelmed. We let it then affect how we feel. Maybe we can feel ourselves tensing up inside the body, but we just keep running with the day anyway, and we kind of almost hold our breath and go to the next thing, right? But if you're experiencing that stress at a root level, there could be some underlying beliefs, for example, that because all this chaos is happening and my kid's screaming over here and this one's doing this over there, it means I'm a bad mum, or it means that this reminds me of a time when I was a kid and this thing was happening to me and I hated it, or whatever, right? It's going to be different for everybody, but depending on how much you hang on to that stressful moment will start to show what level you're experiencing stress. Does that make sense?
It does. And when you have day-to-day stress, like I just described with the kids, that stress is okay. Like I can cope with it until I start adding labels to it. Like you just said, from the past, I'm a bad mum, or I'm not good enough. As soon as you start adding labels to these stresses, that's when they become overwhelming, and that's when suddenly we need to call for help. We need to get some coaching, because that's when it can get really deep rooted. Which kind of brings me to something that you did last year, which I found absolutely fascinating. It was hard for you at the time, but I found it quite fascinating, just kind of watching what was happening. And speaking of the root stresses that come from a long time ago, you went through a phase where you were like, okay, I'm going to deal with some of my trauma. So we're going to say that word. Like it's quite a heavy word, but I'm going to deal with some of my trauma that I know is affecting me in my work, in my life, and I'm finally going to deal with it. And you went away for a while. Like you actually messaged me and you said, I'm going to be gone for a while, so just just letting you know everything's fine, but just check on me every now and again. Like, and I was kind of fascinated. I was like, what is she doing? Like, what's happening? Do I need to do this? Like, so I think that's what I want to explore, because you just off the bat, you were like, I need to deal with this trauma that I have. What was that experience like for you, without going into the details, obviously? But then, do we all have a trauma? Big T's, little T's, like, let's go into that sort of thing. So first of all, yourself, like, what made you decide now is the time for me to go back and confront my trauma? Why now?
Okay. All right. So interesting. So this isn't the first time that I've worked on like some heavy stuff, if you like. So the first time I worked on any kind of past trauma or unresolved emotions was maybe 7-8 years ago.
Okay.
And I worked on a lot, and obviously I've been in this space for a long time, and I've been doing a lot of work kind of along the way. And that I used to live in the UAE during COVID, and we kind of got stuck there. We were supposed to go there for like a month, and we ended up getting stuck there for a year, living kind of in the family home, which was completely unexpected and unplanned, before we was then moving on to Thailand. And that time I discovered that there was like old patterns creeping in, like drinking, like getting triggered by little things that I wouldn't normally get triggered by when I was living obviously independently as an adult later. And when I was there, I was kind of aware of it, but it was almost like right, we're here, let's just get through COVID. We went all into the business stuff, and pretty much throughout that year we were just solidly working. And it was almost like my form of escapism from what I was being triggered by. And then when we left to come to Thailand, everything was lifted. We came here, and all of that just kind of caught up on me, right? So even though I was burying myself in work, and I was doing all of these things, and don't get me wrong, we was doing good work, and there was enjoyable times when we were there, and that kind of thing. But when I moved here, it was like my nervous system kind of just caught up on me, and it was just like, something's got to give right now. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. I hadn't connected the dots as to why I was feeling the way I was potentially triggered from that time in the UK. I hadn't made those connections yet. I can only say that now in hindsight. But it was at that point where I was like, something's got to give. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on just looking after myself and like creating our life here, you know, and just getting back into some solid routines and that kind of thing. And so I stopped drinking. I was only drinking kind of socially and stuff. I decided to stop drinking, cut out sugar as well. And as I started to do these things, I was just becoming more sensitive, right, to my thoughts, to my feelings, more so than I'd ever been before.
So
I was like, there's something here.
The numbing agents. You took away the numbing agents, and suddenly you were there faced with yourself. Yeah, exactly.
And then I was just like, okay, well, let's see where this is going to go. And that was when I just started to journal a bit, and then I was like, okay, what's going on here? Like, I was more emotional than normal. I was starting to remember things from when I was a kid and things like that, remembering things from my early 20s that I thought I'd already worked on, all of these kinds of things. It was just like another layer of emotion, another layer of trauma coming up to be resolved, essentially. So I obviously then reached out to a friend and coach of mine, and she kind of just helped me process a lot of those things, and a lot of that involved facing a lot of things I'd clearly repressed, not consciously, like literally, I mean, like I had no memory of. Like I couldn't have told you what had happened in those instances, but now I can tell you very, very clearly. And it's just bizarre. Like if somebody had come to me and said, right, when you was in your 20s, you experienced sexual trauma, and these times and these moments, I probably wouldn't have believed them to some extent. Right. And so then remembering things and certain memories coming up and being like, whoa, what is this? And then having the courage and the awareness to be able to actually face it, it's like, of course. And then obviously when you start to face things, you can start to release things in different ways. So
because it's really interesting. It does, it really does. And it's really interesting because don't we all feel overwhelmed sometimes, and you're just like, wow, everything's really piling up on me right now. I don't know why I feel this way. A lot of the things you just described are things that we all feel sometimes. We're just like, God, you know, things are really intense. And like, but because you've spent so much time working on yourself, and you know, you took away the numbing agents, the sugar, the alcohol, and you kind of had that awareness, you were able to identify what the problem was. But for so many of us, we don't make that connection. Like, there's so many times when I feel overwhelmed and I feel like things are getting on top of me, and I'm just like, God, what's wrong with me? But I can't make that connection. I don't know what the issue is. So to some extent, do you think everybody needs to work on a trauma? Do we all have trauma that we need to work on?
I think everybody has some kind of trauma. Whether they need to work on it or not would be individual, case by case. Because sometimes our emotions and memories and experiences are repressed for a reason, right? It's our subconscious's way of trying to protect us, and that's really, really important. So I don't believe we should go poking around.
Okay.
Until it's ready. It will come up, right? If there is something that needs to be resolved, it will come up in some way, shape, or form to let you know. The problem is we are so distracted, and there's so much noise, and we're trying to do everything so quickly that we don't notice it coming up. So there's all these clues all the time telling us this. Hello, this thought that you're having right now that keeps on coming up over and over and over again, this is trying to get your attention, but then we get on with the next thing on our to-do list.
Go on our phone.
We pick up
We're just phone. Like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Let me just go on Instagram or Facebook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was another thing I did, actually, by the way, at the start of this year, is that I didn't switch my phone on until midday every day for about 6 months. It was amazing. Like the clarity of thought, the just awareness, that time with myself. And honestly, I think it helps to not drink and not have numbing agents and, you know, have your phone and things like it. Definitely helps. But I think the main premise here is that it's quieting the noise. It's about us just tuning out of everything else just for a bit and tuning in. All right. And it's interesting because when I've done this kind of heavy work in the past, I stepped away from the business and I almost like just separated. It's like, this is me, that's the rest of my life. Right. And this time I didn't do that. As much as I kind of took some space, I was still running the business, I was still running events, I was still coaching. And I truly believe, like, I've done some of the best coaching I've ever done this year, whilst working through that stuff myself at the same time. I think that you can do those things simultaneously. And if you have any coaches that listening to this, that's a big deal, because a lot of people think, well, they can't help other people until they're fully healed and perfect themselves, and then they get upset with themselves because they are not perfect, or they thinking there's something wrong with them because this person seems to be doing it all perfectly. No, it's like everything is working simultaneously, everything's working together in tandem. And I think the sooner we can accept that we don't have to separate things. You don't have to go and spend 6 months not drinking, eating sugar, turning your devices off. You don't have to do that just to pay attention. What you're doing, taking 5 minutes every morning to be present, that's good.
Okay, that's
right.
Good to know.
If we can now, so if we can now just start to open that window, maybe it's 5 minutes in the evening and 5 minutes in the morning. Perfect. Because all that's going to happen is you're going to get more comfortable being with yourself in presence, not rushing on to the next thing. And when we feel more comfortable in our own presence, without numbing agents, without distraction, without devices, without that kind of need for a dopamine hit to mask whatever else is going on, we actually then get to just be. We get to feel safe within ourselves. And I honestly believe that most people don't feel particularly safe within themselves for whatever reason. Not because they've been through some heavy trauma or anything like that. Some cases, obviously, that is the case. But because, like you said, you know, there's a lot going on in the world, right? Whether it's happened to you personally or you've witnessed things happening either in your immediate environment or outside of that, it's having an effect on our psychology. And the problem is we're not taking responsibility for where our attention is going, right? And that's really tripping a lot of people up. This is why a lot of people are experiencing a lot of stress on that life level, right? They're freaking out about their finances and about their relationships, and they're not happy in their jobs and things like this, and they put all of their focus up there. But actually what's going on is you're not paying enough attention to what's going on in your health set, in your body, right? In your quality of thinking, in your heart, in your emotions, in your ability to simply hydrate and drink enough water, your ability to check and see if you can even digest your food, or if you're too stressed to even digest the food that you're having. And then you get to go into that deeper stuff if somebody feels like they're ready for it and they want to. I mean, they have to want to.
I mean, I really want to know all of the tips that you have to overcome stress. But first of all, I just want to clarify for people listening. They might think, okay, but I don't have any trauma. Nothing big has happened to me in my life. So there's that term, the big T's and little T's.
Yeah.
So the big T's are the big traumas, right? Like childhood abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and things like that. And then the little T's are kind of the what would you call the little T's?
Yeah, so they tend to leave less of an impact on our psychology, on our emotion, and on our physical body. Now, I think it's just really important, one, just to kind of keep this in a relatable way, is that when we're talking about any kind of stress or trauma, we're talking about the nervous system, right? So what we're talking about here is our ability to respond, our stress response. So we're talking about our ability to be able to adapt in a stressful situation or not. Now, if you've experienced a big T, right, and you know there's some significant tough stuff that you've been through, then chances are our ability to respond can often be limited or tainted, for want of a better term there. And those smaller T's, we are able to adapt a lot quicker, right? But I have to say this, that is all based on our perception of what a big T and a little T is, right?
So there's no rule book for it.
No, right? So if I'm 6 years old and I have lost my shoes in the school playground, and I've lost my shoes, and I'm really, really upset that I've lost my shoes, right? And I'm so upset, I'm throwing a big tantrum, I've got all these emotions going on, right? That can actually leave a mark on my nervous system as a 6-year-old. Right. In just the same way as a 6-year-old that has been through some kind of neglect or abuse. That can leave the same mark on our system, right? So it all depends on the perception, how those emotions, how those situations are dealt with. So I really don't think it's as clean cut as little T's, big T's. I think people know if they've experienced some heavy stuff, the big T's, right, traditionally speaking, but they might not know directly. So like me, it might be something that's repressed, right? There's still literally, I pick the age of 6 there, I literally have a kind of a blackout of what happened to me at 6 years old. I've got no idea. Like there's literally like no photos. If I go back through the photo albums and stuff, right, I've got every year except the age of 6, and for the life of me, nobody can tell me what was going on at that time. Well, nobody will tell me, and I can't recall either, right? So I know on some level that's left some kind of effect on me. But can I tell you what it is? No, I can't tell you specifically. Does that mean I should go and probe and try and figure it out? No. If I'm supposed to know, then it will come up in the way that it's supposed to, right? In a way when it's ready to be dealt with.
I don't know if you agree, but I think the way that a trauma comes about can be how you actually deal with a situation that's presented in front of you. So, like you said, the child with the shoes, if they dealt
Yep.
with it in a kind of, let's say, normal way, where you're just kind of like, oh, I think the shoes are gone, oh, damn, like, and kind of move on, then that doesn't leave a mark. But then if you don't have the tools available to deal with it in a healthy way, then it becomes a trauma, because there's two I mean, I believe I have a small cluster of traumas, because you know, the way I go about things day to day, there's definitely some let's call it unhealthy thought patterns in there, you know, things that hold me back and things that kind of, you know, get me all twisted up in knots, and I don't know how, I don't know why. But there's two instances that I'm willing to talk about, and that is, I lost someone very close to me when I was 21. So I dealt with a death. But then when I was 23, I was bullied at work. So those two kind of traumas. The time that I lost someone at the age of 21, believe it or not, it didn't leave a mark. I wouldn't call it a trauma, because I dealt with it in a very, very healthy way. I dealt with it in the healthiest way that I could have possibly have done. You know, I let all my emotions out. I was talking about it all the time. I was kind of doing exactly what I wanted to do every moment. I was kind of, in a way, I was dedicated to living my best life. Like, as soon as they passed, I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to live my best life. And I really did for about a year afterwards. And so I wouldn't actually count that as a trauma. But when I was bullied at work when I was 23, I didn't deal with it very well. I internalized everything. I punished myself, because I was like, Tam, you should have said something, or you should have stuck up for yourself. And I made a lot of assumptions and decisions about myself. I basically, it was a very, very negative experience, and that became a trauma. So actually losing someone close to me and being bullied at work was actually more traumatic for that reason, for what I've just explained. So that's kind of how traumas come about, like just how you deal with it.
It is, and it's our perception of the situation, right? Somebody else you probably know in common with the person that you lost may not have had that same perception at the time. That following year might not have been the best year of their life, you know, but for you it was. That's all based on perception, or the information that we take in, and then how we process it. And I think it's interesting to use those two examples, because I think grief is something that is very publicly accepted.
Yes.
And it's something that is talked about.
You're right.
Whereas something like bullying often comes with a lot of shame. A lot of confusion. And
yeah, because I wasn't clear that I was being bullied at the time. I was like, this isn't happening. And I didn't know until I left. I was like, okay, I was just bullied. But I didn't know at the time, because I was making excuses for the people. And, you know, anyone who's listening, if you're going through any sort of emotion and you don't understand it, you kind of only know until you've left it and you just look back.
Yeah, exactly. Hindsight is a wonderful thing sometimes, isn't it? And that's one of the reasons, I'd say, like, one of the reasons why we do what we do. One of the reasons why we set up Wellness Theory is because I didn't have any kind of education about how to deal with shame, or how to deal with fear, or even to recognize when these emotions are there, and what kind of things am I perceiving as a threat. What things are creating additional traumas within me based on my past experiences. You know, I didn't have that skill set growing up, and that was one of the reasons why we created Wellness Theory, because we wanted to make sure that people do have that education. They do start to understand and can connect with themselves, so they can recognize if they're in a toxic environment, or if they're recognizing that maybe their quality of thinking is leaving some kind of clue that something isn't quite right. You know, so that we don't have to wait until after an event. Now, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It's an individual thing. But my whole thing is about being proactive rather than reactive. I would much rather work with somebody before they get burnt out, or before they are realizing that there's this trauma they haven't dealt with. I would much rather work with somebody when they have that awareness early on, so they don't have to go through all of that. Now, that might be all sunshine and rainbows kind of mentality, like the wish. But I truly believe that if we can do better and have more access to education, but also ignite a new level of personal responsibility within ourselves, then we can be more proactive. Right? We can learn from those experiences in such a way that makes us better, so that we don't spiral and we don't get stuck into systems and quick medication without much investigation and all of those kind of avenues. I truly believe there is an alternative way if we're willing to own it and be responsible and be inquisitive. One of the things I love about you the most is how inquisitive you are and how curious you are. And I think there's not enough of that when it comes to our own well-being sometimes. So I think if we can at least be some kind of bridge somewhere in there that helps to connect some dots at least, then I think hopefully we can help people not to get to that point of kind of concern, right, about the past, and realizing that they've been bullied long after the fact, you know, and realizing you've experienced trauma years later. You know, it just doesn't make sense for me.
I can imagine once someone works on themselves and they clean up the stress and they begin to clean up the traumas, and I can imagine then the path forward is much brighter and it's much clearer, and they're like, right, I'm ready, I'm strong enough now to kind of stretch myself and live my best life. And so what sort of tips do you have for someone who wants to sort of make changes in their life? They want to start to live their best life. Like, what sort of daily tips do you have to kind of help them move in that direction? Is it easy to condense it? Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing is awareness, right? Whatever somebody needs to do to get awareness, right? For me, journaling heightens my awareness more than anything.
Same.
For Jonathan, my husband, is breathing. Right, if he just sits with his breath, he becomes hyper aware of what's going on in his mind, in his body, and the day to day, all of those things. For me and you, it's journaling. For other people, it might be going for a walk outside. It's going to be different for everyone, but awareness is the key, right? Is one, figure out what is that thing that brings you into awareness, and then be willing to take responsibility for what you find.
Right.
Because I can sit here and say, okay, do this breathing technique, or just do this thing, and give you loads of hacks, which we've got loads of on the website, which you can go and do, but they're not going to create any kind of lasting effect. So first we need to become aware of what's going on. Why do we think that we're stressed in the first place? Why are we even listening to this podcast? And you know, what's resonating? Have that level of awareness to then say, okay, what could this mean for me? What is this trying to tell me? What is this trying to teach me? As soon as you start asking those questions, you're becoming more responsible.
And you know what,
right? You're becoming more able to respond.
And on the subject of journaling, there's one of my favorite books, The Artist's Way. Have you heard of it? It's one of my favorite books. And basically one of the tasks that she makes is for people to journal 3 pages every morning. She calls them the morning pages. No fail, like every morning do 3 pages, even if you have nothing to say. She says, just write, I have nothing to say, I have nothing to say, I have nothing to say. So every morning you get 3 pages done. And she says, if you do that, then literally the things that come up on paper will surprise you. Like, you'll have goals that you never knew you had. You'll have issues that you need to work through that you never knew you had. So it's a really great tool for what you've just said, becoming aware, like journaling, writing down how you feel. If that's your sort of thing, for anyone listening, then it's highly recommended. And I have to say, journaling was a huge part to play in, you know, my healing over the last few years. Like, you know, just becoming aware of like my feelings and what I want to do with my life. And so I would highly recommend that. Journaling for sure, for awareness. But then, like you said, everyone has a different thing.
They do, but I think it's important because I think depending on what people follow on social media and what kind of things they're reading, there's a lot being geared towards breath work, ice baths and things like that right now. They're like obviously big trends that have been happening over the last year or two, and that's all well and good, but if you don't have the awareness as to why you're doing it or how you're responding to those things, it becomes
then you're
pointless.
just stepping in an ice bath and it's like, oh, it's just cold, okay, I'm gonna get out, that's it. Like there's no lesson, there's no kind of
Exactly. So one of the things I think is so important about something like journaling, and it could be written journaling, it could be a voice memo kind of journaling, recording yourself, if you're not really a writing kind of person, but it literally starts to rewire your neurons in your brain. Like it will literally help you to articulate what you're experiencing. It will help you to gain clarity on your perceptions, right? Because most people, when they come to us initially, we tend to work on, number one, regulating their system, so we get some kind of breathing activity going on, whatever that looks like for that person. But the other thing we do is we witness their quality of thinking. Well, they witness it obviously, and then we obviously discuss that and do what we need to do with it. But by witnessing the thoughts that we're having, I would say 9 times out of 10, as soon as we start to check in with the quality of thinking, the words that we are using for our perceptions, right, and we start writing them down and we see them on paper, we start to see how that's then affecting how we feel, because very often we are feeling our thinking. And if we don't know what we're thinking because we're not writing it down or we're not saying it out loud, it all gets a bit stuck in there. It's like this frenetic energy that just gets like chaotic in there. And this is one of the reasons why often people can't sleep at night, or they get so overwhelmed, or they get anxious, right? Or their head starts throbbing, right? For me, one of the things, if I'm really going through a stressful period, like my temples almost throb. I'll get a headache. There was a period of my life where I'd have migraines. And a lot of that was just this pent up energy that needed to be released in some way, shape or form. So I think journaling isn't just about writing on paper, it's about all of the things that we get to release at the same time, and all the clarity that comes with it at the same time. So I think it can definitely be a game changer for anybody that's curious about journaling.
So first thing is awareness.
Yes.
So what's next?
The responsibility piece. That's
responsibility.
Huge. We have to then be responsible for what it is we're becoming aware of. Responsibility can look like taking the lesson from what we've become aware of. It can look like taking an action. It could look like reaching out and asking for help. It could look like sitting in presence for 5 minutes. It could look like just setting an intention. All right, is that I'm going to be more compassionate today with myself. All right, it can be anything. But as soon as we're willing to say, right, I'm responsible for what I'm coming aware of, I'm going to own this, whatever I find, I'm going to figure it out. We immediately move out of any kind of victim mindset, right? And again, victim mindset is like the fastest route to stress and burnout. Right? So anything that brings some semblance of responsibility, so awareness and responsibility is key.
Okay. And is there any more after that, or those are the two main steps?
Then it becomes very
abstract,
dependent on what people are already doing and what they need. So we do have on our website, it's a free assessment tool that anybody listening can go and do, where they will get assessed to find out, one, what level are they experiencing stress? Are they experiencing their stress day to day? Are they experiencing it in their body, or is there something deeper going on at the root? So they can immediately see that. But each of those 3 levels are split then into different things. So for example, on the health level, we'll then have a bit of an assessment on, okay, how's your hydration? How is your ability to breathe? How is your ability to regulate your own emotions? And they'll get insights and then tips specific to the thing that they've scored lower on.
So I guess I'm just going to get a bit more specific now. And I'm aware of the time, I can see, because in Thailand you're 12 hours ahead. So for me in Cayman Islands, it's 9:42 in the morning. So for you, it's 9:42 at night. So that's crazy. Just how, like, I always get blown away by the fact that we're talking and you're literally across the world. That's crazy. But anyway, I just want to get a bit more specific for a second, because I am in the nutrition space and exercise And a lot of the women that I deal with, they are struggling with weight, or they're struggling with discipline with their food. And some even have binge eating tendencies, binge eating disorders, emotional eating. And I resonate with that because that's something I struggled with all throughout my 20s, binge eating. So if someone is wanting to get into a healthy state this year, they want to change the way they eat, they want to experiment with fasting, they want to experiment with, eating better foods and exercising, then how would you advise someone who is struggling with the opposite, which is emotional eating and, not feeling motivated?
Yeah, so first of all, I can totally relate to that. So I've had my periods of emotional eating to the point of, eating to the point of throwing up at times and things like that.
Seriously,
And
did not know that.
not pleasant. Yeah, Tim
Okay.
Tams. People
Yeah.
in Australia will know those Tim Tam biscuits.
Yeah,
I
totally.
think about those. Those were my go-to thing. But then
Mine were chocolate digestives.
there you go.
Everyone has a thing.
So I can speak to this from a few different angles. So I think the first thing is you need to know, why is this going to be different from any other time? Like, what is it about now that makes you want to shift this? Is it that you're just sick and tired of it, and you're just exhausted and you can't continue with this same repetitive cycle? Like, are you at that point where it's so painful that you have to change? Or is it that it's something that's kind of manageable at times, and then we can bury our head in the sand and pretend that actually it's okay most of the time, and it's just this little thing on the side that I do? So I think, first of all, again, that level of awareness needs to come into play, but recognize why is now the most important time. And it needs to be linked to two things. It needs to be linked to your why, right, as to why you want to do it, but also your values. Okay, our core values are responsible for 80% of our self-initiated motivation.
Wow.
Okay, so that means, just to give you some idea, if you was working out and you had your music on to give you some motivation, right, the music is only 20% of the motivation, right? The other 80% is coming from whatever's going on inside your mind that is making you think this is important, right? So same thing with personal trainer, right? It's like they're really 20% of the motivation. We tell ourselves it's because of them. It's not. It's coming from your core values. But the problem is most people don't know what they value in that context. So when it comes to wanting to make a change, we need to know, why do I want to make a change? And then secondly, why is this so important to me? What is it about being healthier that is so important? Is it so that I can play with my kids? Is it because I've realized I'm no longer invincible and I need to look after myself better? Is it because I know that I can perform better for my job and earn more money because my family needs me to earn more money right now? Right.
There's a really great exercise, and I'm sure you've come across it. Of course you have, but I was talking about it with Dr. Eni Kadar not too long ago. 7 levels deep. So how you find your why. So you say, first of all, why do you want to start a fasting program? Let's say you say, why do you want that? Why is it important? You say, well, because I want to look good in a dress, or I want to look good in this outfit. You say, okay, so why is that important? And you keep asking why is that important? Why is that important? 7 times. And then when you get to the end, there should be some core reason why, but you might have to do it over and over again, this worksheet. It's not, when I've done it twice, because the first time didn't resonate with me. The first time I came up with, because on my deathbed I don't want to have any regrets, and even though that's a fabulous why, that's a really great why, it didn't resonate with me. I was like, okay, that didn't feel right. But when I did the sheet for the second time, I came up with my why, and I knew it was the true why, because it gave me goosebumps and it kind of made me a bit emotional. And my why is, the reason why I do anything that I do is because I want to be the woman that I prayed to be as a child. I it's a good one, right?
Powerful. Really powerful.
Seriously, I used to pray, as a child, I used to pray at my parents' bay window, And I used to just pray for all the things I wanted in the future. And even now, like when I feel like I lose confidence, or I feel like I need a bit of a boost, I'm not feeling great, I have photos of myself when I was a child, because I know my why now. I now have photos of myself as a little girl. And I just look at them and I'm like, okay, that gives me motivation, because I'm like, I'm going to deliver for you. Like, I'm doing this for you. And that is my why. And it kind of gives me goosebumps. It kind of makes me emotional. So yeah, that's
powerful.
right.
That's super powerful. That's like inner child stuff there as well.
Yes.
That's root level work, what you're doing.
Nice.
Right, that is that deep core work.
I feel really proud
awesome.
right now.
You should, right? Because you're owning it, right? You're owning it. You're stepping up and you're showing up. And I think if we could all just show up for ourselves that little bit more, then I think we'd probably all be a bit happier with ourselves. But I think with values, it is about the almost the other things that you can gain from doing it. So that's a super powerful why, but then I'd be like, okay, what else is important to you about being healthier? Is it about confidence? Is it about recognition? Is it about achievement? Is it about self-connection? Like there'll be more things around it, and those are the things that you value. So the thing that I see the most, right, or I used to see when I was in that kind of fitness space, working in health clubs and stuff, was the classic of, I want to tone up and I want to lose weight. Right,
obviously.
I want to tone up, lose weight, and I'd be like, okay, what's your why? You'd find out their why. But then they would be there at the gym because they think that's the way that they need to do it. But actually, when you start to dig into what do you value, well, they value fun, they value community, they value connection. Okay, well, you're not going to get that coming into the gym at like 5 o'clock in the morning on your own, when you've told me also that rest, when you've also told me that rest is important to you and you actually hate the gym. You know, it's like,
how many people can agree with that? They're like, they go to the gym but they hate it. Like, it's just a no-brainer. It's like, oh, like, find something else.
Find something that you do, right? So for me, I worked in gyms since I was 16, right? And so for me, I was like kind of almost thrust into that environment, and it was almost like that's the way you do it. And I realized probably about 10 years later, maybe 15, is that I don't like the gym at all. Like, for myself and my own training, like, I think it's got its place, and I think it's obviously it's incredible for getting certain results, but I don't love the gym. Like, for my own training, I'd much rather be the one training outside. I want to be the one that's kayaking around 3 islands in Thailand. Like, I want to be the one going for hikes and climbing mountains. And for me, when I left that kind of gym environment, that was when I reconnected with my own passion for fitness again. Right. Like, I was still obviously interested and learning about wellness and all of these different elements of it when I was working in those environments. But the most powerful thing is aligning with your own core values, because there's no point that Bob next door said you've got to go to the gym and tone up. Oh, okay, brilliant, because that's the way they did it and got great results. That's great for Bob, but it's terrible for Tamara that actually isn't that interested in those things. So we've got to align with the things that are important with us.
Right. So people who want to be, eating healthier this year, want to be more active, want to live a healthier lifestyle, your advice would be to, first of all, connect with what truly brings you joy and truly connects with you as a person, and don't just follow what you think you should be doing. Like, and I suppose discovering that means to get quiet, to kind of sit with yourself, maybe journal, find your values, think of, discover your why, do the 7 levels deep, and, just a cluster of things first before you kind of dive in.
Yeah, but also try stuff.
Try stuff. Right?
Try things out and see if you like it, but then reflect on, did you like it? Don't just try it and be like, oh no, I really didn't like it. Actually, no, reflect on it, because there might be one little thing about it that you liked, and then that's your clue for the next thing that you try. Right? So it might be that you didn't enjoy the gym, but it might be that actually you got curious about going to a class in the gym. Okay, brilliant. So that's left us a clue to the next thing to try. So again, it's that awareness and reflection to start dissecting and pulling out your truth in the whole experience, so it becomes authentic. Otherwise, you just chasing goals, you're not immersing yourself in them. And I think when we can immerse ourselves in things, then we start to actually create a lifestyle which creates lasting change.
Yeah, because I think for myself, I discovered a long time ago that you're right, going to the gym is tough on your own. So I discovered a long time ago that I just love classes. So whenever there's a class, I'm much more likely to go than if it means kind of going to the gym on my own. Don't get me wrong, like I do love going to the gym on my own sometimes, but I'm a lot more motivated when it involves classes. And also, like, you know, food wise, I really resonated with fasting. Like that really kind of helped me fix the way that I was eating from my binge eating. Like I just discovered it by accident, and it kind of helped me overcome the binge eating, even though it wasn't the number one thing that helped me. It was just one of the things. And that's why, like, I love it so much. So it's about finding your particular way that you like to do things, and kind of doing it your way, not anybody else's way. That's why this podcast is called Your Body's Way. Thank you very much, everyone.
I love that.
I didn't even plan that.
You're not wrapping up, are you? I wanted, if you've got time, I want to mention one more thing on binge eating.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Something else is really important to consider when we're binge eating or emotionally eating is the emotion part, right? What we've just talked about is really important stuff, but if we're being weighed down by emotion and we feel like we're being ruled by emotion, that we're just doing things and we don't realize we're doing it or why we're doing it, right? It's like you can have all the will in the world and know your values and know your why, but if you've got unresolved negative emotions that are fueling your behaviors, then it's still going to be hard to move into action. So if somebody's listening to this and they get their why, they've explored their values and they still can't move into action, then the reality is there's likely some emotion that needs to be let go of. And now that could be past emotion, like we spoke about earlier. That could be trauma. That could just be emotion that's got a bit stuck in the body because we haven't moved the body or we haven't connected with the body in a long time. But those things essentially almost like clog up our system in a way, and they make us stagnant. So therefore, then when we want to move into the action that we want, like being healthier, we get stuck because our life force energy is getting stuck, right? And our emotions play a big part. That energy, emotions are energy, that plays a big part in our ability to be able to flow and to make decisions that are coherent and congruent with who we are. So if somebody is struggling with that, I really recommend you start maybe keeping a note of what are the emotions that you're experiencing before you reach for that food, before you ask yourself, what need are you fulfilling right now? Or is it loneliness? Is it sadness? Is it shame? Is it
boredom?
Like, is it all of those things? Is it a cocktail of everything? Are you not sure? Do you feel numb? Right? Those things need to be explored, right? And for some people that might just be a case of maybe observing themselves for a couple of weeks and seeing a pattern of, oh, every time I have this argument with my partner, this is what triggers me to do this. I feel angry, I feel resentful, I feel unheard, I feel small, and then you go and eat, right? Okay, then you need to address those feelings. Then you address the situation with the partner, but you need to address the feelings. How are you regulating those emotions? Because when we emotionally eat, it's because our emotions are not regulated. We either don't know what we're feeling or how we're feeling, or we're not taking responsibility to learn what it is we need to learn so that emotion can flush out of our system.
That's really interesting. And for me, it was definitely boredom. I remember those days because I was kind of I was a personal trainer, but then I was kind of switching between job roles a lot in my 20s, like in my early 20s specifically. And I just remember the times in between switching roles and just the boredom. Like I remember that was the main thing. But then also, funnily enough, that was the time when I was dating. And it was very linked. So whenever I had an argument with someone, or if there was a breakup or some sort of heartbreak, like that would definitely trigger a cascade of binges and a cascade of like self-doubt and self-loathing. So you know, I said that fasting helped me overcome binge eating, but then I also say like actually meeting my husband, because all of that kind of stopped, like that kind of heartbreak and kind of ups and downs.
Okay.
Like it's just, that was interesting for
So
me to discover that.
that is definitely interesting. And I would say just one thing on that
Mm.
is be aware that it hasn't just transferred in another
Mm.
way, right? So
Right.
now it might not be binge eating is a way to regulate emotions,
Mm.
because now you're not having those emotions, but perhaps we're busy in ourselves,
Yeah, that's
or we're moving
precisely
too
it. I was
fast.
going to say that. I was going
Okay.
to say I've replaced it
Okay.
with being
Yeah.
busy. Yeah,
Okay.
which
So
which is
let's come back to our center. Regulate those emotions by simply witnessing them, by simply observing and being like, right, what am I feeling? Why do I have this need to be busy? What is the emotion that's driving this busyness right now?
yeah,
Is it fear? Is it scarcity? Like what is it? What's going on?
yeah,
And then you can shine a light on it, and then do what you need to do, because then when you're not as busy, you can be more present, you can
yeah.
slow down time essentially, and
Yeah, because
enjoy it
I
for what it
think a
is.
lot. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say when you're not busy and you're not doing anything, you feel like it you feel kind of lost. You're kind of like, okay, well, what do I do now? So maybe that's the crux of the issue.
Nothing.
It's like
Nothing.
the fact that, okay, so maybe you need to be okay with just doing nothing. Like maybe that's the
100%. That's
thing for the
it.
people who are busy. It's
That is
like
it.
that moment in time between jobs. It's like being okay with that. Maybe that's what you need to work on. And do you
Yeah.
know what? I'm going to be working on that now, because I still
Yeah.
struggle with these things. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a mess, so to speak, because you know, like I always
Not
kind of
at
on.
all.
I mean, even before this conversation, I was kind of unloading on you on all the things that I'm worried about. But I do worry, and I get busy, and I feel like, you know, I'm not doing enough, and those are things that I struggle with. So, you know, whenever I come off a conversation with you, I always feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing now, and I always have this fresh routine after talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to recognize though that some of, like, that's also your superpower at the same time,
Mm,
right? And I think it between our strengths being
mm,
or our strengths being detrimental to us. So I think that's one of the things that makes you so powerful. Do as a mom, as a podcaster, nutritionist, friend, everything is because of that mindset. So I think
mm.
that can be a really healthy thing, but it's when we don't know when to put the brakes on and we tire ourselves out and we get burnt out
That's
that
it.
becomes a problem. And I'm still guilty of that at times,
Yeah.
like burning the candle at both ends. That's one of the reasons I put out water to spend at least 1 to 3 days in
Mm.
silence, in meditation, because it makes me put the brakes on. It
Yeah.
makes me step out of the busyness and brings me back to me, so I can go again and pace myself. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I am like a Duracell bunny and I will go. I can sit here and talk to you for hours
Yeah.
into the early hours of the morning after finishing that moving kayaking challenge, and
Mm.
do that. That's terrible for me.
Yeah.
I guess,
Well,
it's knowing when to stop and put the brakes on.
yeah. I feel like we're talking about all of this, and it makes it all the more clear that this is serious work for someone. If someone wants to overcome their stress and they want to be their best selves, and you know, they want to live their best life 2023, it takes work. And this is why having someone help you out is really useful, because there's so much to unpack. So, wellness theory,
Yeah.
where can people find you if they need help with unpacking things for 2023? How can they find out more about you?
Yeah, literally just go to the wellnesstheory.com. We're on all social media platforms at Wellness Theory.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to the website, you can do the stress test, which is free. There's a free masterclass that you'll do. You can have access to at the end of that. So there's so much free stuff out there. Just get you going, and it will help you to be able to have that awareness. And then all you then need to add in is the responsibility piece, and you're away running. And if you want more help, then you can start to look at our programs and stuff. But that's the best place to start, is go and do that stress test, see where you are.
Yeah, love it. I always come away with so much after speaking to you, and I'm already kind of focusing on just having my time, like being present, and you know, just being with myself.
Love that.
So yeah, thank you so much for being on this podcast. And I really think the next episode should be about meditation, because that's another big thing that you do, and maybe digging into values more and just kind of excavating a bit more of like more tools for people to use. I think we should do that next time. Yeah, that's a date.
Sure. Whenever you want. It's funny, like we was obviously planning to have a catch up today, and obviously your listeners won't know this, but Sam sent me a WhatsApp just saying, should we just hit record on this and see what happens? And then like we're like full on interview, completely didn't really know. But it's all good. This is generally what we talk about anyway, to some extent.
It is genuinely what we talk about, and that's why I wanted to press record, because I feel like people need to hear more about what you have to say, because you come out with some real truth bombs and some really amazing tips. I'm just like, God, I think people need to hear more of this. So I just think if I just press record a bit more often on our conversations, then we can share some of your knowledge like that. I think that's what needs to happen. Thank you. It's a date.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. See you later.